Syrian government troops captured the final stretch of the highway that links the eastern city of Deir al-Zor to the capital Damascus, forcing the Islamic State to retreat to Syria's Euphrates Valley. Experts are billing it as the terrorist group's last stand in Syria. But could this also be the war-torn nation's last stand with terrorism? On Saturday, the Syrian military forces broke the crippling jihadist siege on the eastern city of Deir al-Zor. The Syrian government welcomed the army advances, which it said foreshadowed the end of terrorism. According to a statement distributed by Syrian news agency Sana, the foreign ministry in Syria's capital Damascus said, and I'm quoting here, "The battle with these mercenaries is nearing its end, so that every inch of Syrian land will be free of terrorism." This statement comes after the Islamic State began losing its stronghold across Syria. The jihadists have lost half of their territory across Iraq and Syria, leaving 6,000 to 8,000 of its fighters in Syria. The biggest blow to the Islamic State came when US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces seized 65% of Raqqa city. Government troops are breaking the 3-year ISIS siege in Deir al-Zor. ISIS has lost half its territory across Iraq and Syria. 6,000 to 8,000 ISIS fighters remain in Syria. SDF has seized around 65% of Raqqa city. Now, Islamic State fighters are fleeing to Euphrates Valley, where they could be cornered not just by Syrian militias, but also by Russian airstrikes and the US, which aims to attack the jihadist areas on the east to the other side of the Euphrates River. The broken siege has also broken the locks on the Syrian Hedam al-Ahmad's pizza place as he eagerly awaits his grand reopening. He brought down the shutters on Prince of Pizza and Pies 3 years ago when the Islamic State set its footprint in Deir al-Zor, forcing its siege on nearly 100,000 Syrians. Food supplies have now begun entering a western enclave of the city. The rest of the world is also preparing as Syria might regain itself from a civil war that began in 2011. Next week, Kazakhstan will host talks on a set of safe zones in Syria, agreed upon by world leaders as a first step towards a political solution. The United Nations is also hoping to gather members of Syrian opposition and government for negotiation talks in October.
People requires immediate actions to renew urgently their commitment to make it right.
The Syrian government troops capturing the final stretch of the highway that links the eastern city of Deir al-Zor to the capital Damascus, forcing the Islamic State to retreat to Syria's Euphrates Valley. Now, experts are billing this as the terrorist group's last stand in Syria. But also, the question that remains unanswered is, could this be the war-torn nation's last stand with terrorism? This after the Syrian military forces broke the crippling jihadist siege on the eastern city of Deir al-Zor. The Syrian government has welcomed the army advances, which it said foreshadowed the end of terrorism. According to a statement distributed by Syrian news agency Sana, the foreign ministry in Syria's capital Damascus has also issued that statement, saying that the battle with these mercenaries is nearing its end. Let's go straight across to our international correspondent, Daniele Pagani, who's been closely monitoring the developments. Good evening, Daniele. As we've been discussing, could this be the end of the military rule of Islamic State?
Yes, I would be very cautious in the sense that there is an offensive which is ongoing right now. The offensive is ongoing in Deir al-Zor. The offensive is ongoing in the city of Raqqa, which is the capital city of the Islamic State. There are still terrorists there, so saying that this is the end is a bit too strong. Saying that this is the beginning of the military end might be appropriated. These are the last two, I would define, real strongholds, military strongholds of the Islamic State. When it comes to Deir al-Zor, the Islamic State had its last oil drilling field there, which we happen to understand by the national agency, the Syrian National Press Agency, Sana, that is now in the hands of the Syrian Arab Army, which is the regular army of Syria. It means that even the last source of income that the Islamic State had, it's not anymore with them. So yes, it's a defeat. It's the beginning of the end. The Syrian Arab Army is marching from the south, reconquering slowly Deir, a city which is a pretty big and important city. The Syrian Democratic Forces, which is a coalition supported by the Islamic State, is attacking Raqqa, is well inside the city of Raqqa from the north. So it's a pince move, and slowly what remains of the Islamic State will be squeezed in without anywhere to go.
What also remains a mystery, Daniele, is where Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi really is, and if at all, do we know more on what really happened to him last?
I wish I could say yes, because this would perhaps make me the person who puts the real end to the military history of the Islamic State. But unfortunately, when it comes to chasing these very important figures in the history of terrorism, it's very difficult because, number one, the organization itself tended to preserve these people. They tend to hide them. They tend to hide them well in advance, well before the possibility of them getting caught in between the military action. So perhaps, maybe, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is not even in Iraq since maybe months. It's somewhere else. The second thing is that, to a certain extent, these kind of organizations do have an international network, and it is possible for them to move their leaders from one country to the other. And this could be another big problem, because this sort of network is not only made by terrorists and underground, let's call them underground organization, but also by deep state actors in several other states. So when it comes to understanding where he is, it's really something that nobody knows. And whatever comes out in these days is perhaps fake news. Even the intelligence agency, the international intelligence agencies, do receive perhaps contradictory hints on where he might or might not be. And it's clear that they don't even know where he is.